Hello, hello, hello. This is your faithful Dragonite Master or Saxophone 1296. I'm here to read you a fanfic, just because I felt like it. Actually, no, someone sent me in and told me to read it, so that's what I'm doing. I'm gonna read this fanfic for you guys. Yay, said nobody. Let's get this started. Peaceful Soaring by One Time to Pretend 3. And the description of this is a story of Aang's early life, beginning 12 BSC in the reign of the Fire Lord Aizen. Rated T for childbirth, suicide, death, etc. Read, review, and enjoy. Push! A nun screamed at a young woman lying on the bed. The woman's long, dark, brown hair was strewn over her face and all around her, draped over her shoulders and under her slight frame. Her yellow and orange clothes were pushed up, and she let out a painful cry and dug her fingernails into the tan sheets. Her head tilted back, her gray eyes squeezed tightly closed. She didn't know childbirth would be this painful. Beside her stood a young man. His nervous amber eyes flickered over his wife's body in worry. His fingers graved through his thick black hair and then intertwined with hers. "You can do this," he said with a reassuring smile, though his voice was shaky. "I know you can." Kona winced as the woman below him let out a cry of pain and clawed into her husband's skin, drawing blood. She was instructed every now and then to pause before pushing again, and each time seemed to bring more and more pain. This had been going on for hours. Sania stared up at him. Torture clearly shone in her eyes. She gave a few more heaves and strains, and before she knew it, a little head began to emerge down below. She rested, then pushed, restart, then pushed, and more of a tiny body began to appear. Kona began looking away, though he did grow a bit faint at the sight. He smiled through it. His child was so close to coming into the world. Their child. "Keep it up, love. You're doing wonderful." He stroked her arm gently. The temple's halls echoed with blood-curdling screams, followed by joyful, "It's a boy," and the cries of a newborn human baby. While she regained herself, the first thing that Sania noticed was that little bundle of pale yellow cloth fixed in her arm. The only visible part of the baby were his head and his tiny hands and feet. His skin was pale and still a bit transparent. What little hair he had was plastered to his skin with bits of plants, whatever that word is, and his closed eyes were sticky-looking with clear liquid. He was absolutely beautiful. "Hey, little guy," Conan said softly, tracing the baby's toes carefully with his fingers. "Nice to meet you." Sania beamed and nuzzled her husband. You two aren't completely acquainted yet, you know. He needs a name." He slid his arm around her and sat. What about Aang?" "Peaceful Soaring," she smiled proudly at her son and at the meaning of the name. "I love it. Aang it is. I had a feeling you'd like it." The young boy nodded tiredly and weakly handed the child over to Kona. Little eyelids slipped open, revealing shiny gray eyes like storm clans. Kona stared in awe and held him close to his chest. He looked down at his wife, who was quickly falling asleep. "I love you, Sania." Sania did not respond. Has sleep had already overtaken her? The Fire Nation's man's lips curled into a gentle smile. His gaze returned to his son, who was following his mother's lead in sleep. Kona leaned the baby up and placed a kiss on Aang's soft forehead. "And I love you too, Aang." That was chapter 1, Birth. Guess there's 2 chapters. So, get some coffee, everything you want, while the page loads. Okay, here we go. A couple of days passed, and soon enough the young family was home at their cottage-type home. It was autumn, and they were in the Fire Nation. so it was still a bit warm, but the weather had been kind to them. Sania held her baby close as Conan unlocked the door. The familiar smells of home flooded the air as they went inside. "Are you hungry, dear?" he asked, helping her sit on a rather old couch in the sitting room. "Starving. What would you like? I'll make anything you want. Whatever you have, just feed me, please." Kona smirked. For months his wife had been craving the oddest things, and if she didn't get them immediately, things could get ugly. It'd be much easier making meals now. He went into the kitchen and retrieved a pan from the cupboard. He set it on the stove as 3 loud knocks sounded from the front door. He rushed over and opened the door. 3 tall men bowed before him. He bowed back, or air nomad style, glad to have practiced as many times as he had. "Good morning," one of the men greeted. "Good morning," Kona replied. "What can I do for you?" "We bring grave news from the Fire Nation. Avatar Roku has passed." He frowned profusely. "That's terrible. When did he die?" "A few days ago." Kona blinked and glanced back at his son, then shook his head slowly. "That's terrible. Thank you for the news." "You're very welcome, sir. Best wishes, and may the spirits watch over you." "Same to you." He shut the door nervously as the men left. He turned around and looked at Sania. She had a death grip on Aang. Her fingers clutched the blanket around him so tightly that her knuckles were white. "Oh no, not again," Kona whispered. He sat beside her and kissed her. "It's all right, Sania. Everything is fine." "You don't think—" "No, everything's all right, I promise." She sighed and stared into his eyes. "All right, if you say so." He leaned in and lovingly kissed her, and she returned the favor. He pulled back and stroked her cheek. "What would you like to do?" "Sleep," she answered with a yawn. "All right." He took Aang from her arms and held him close. "Sleep well." Kona took Aang out into the front yard and sat in the grass. The sun was hiding behind thick clouds, barely visible. He watched the baby's eyes open and stare up at him. "Hi there, Aang." Aang made no sound. Kona looked up at the sky. "Your mama's just a little afraid. She gets afraid a lot. She can't help it." He was talking mostly to himself, knowing that Aang couldn't understand him. "No matter what she does, she loves you, though. Don't forget that." He breathed a sigh and stared off into the distance as the wind rustled his yellow robes. He was glad to have finally found something that fit without getting caught. Fire Nation men were built different than Air Nomad men. And that's the end of chapter 2. And I'll promise they'll get longer eventually, the author says. Yep. Goodbye.